Guys, I wanted to give you a little bit of a trigger warning for this episode. It's a bit dark, it's a bit heavy, but if you stick around till the end, you will hear a story of redemption, resilience, and willpower. So, if this is the kind of episode for you, do stay tuned, but just be warned. So I interviewed Dale Turcotte, a very, very resilient man who experienced a very traumatic childhood with neglectful parents, where he was eventually put into the foster care system, bouncing around from home to home, and he experienced sexual predators at a very young age.
My mother told one of the other girls that she wanted to go back home. My dad introduced my mother to crack cocaine.
As he grew up, he experienced a lot of rage and pent-up anger built inside of him, which ended up turning into him being very violent, which eventually landed him up in the prison system himself.
So my plan was I was just going to beat the shit out of him for what he did to these girls. So we go to his house, one of the biggest people I've ever seen, like muscle-wise. But I was so angry. He could just put me in victim mode. Like his ribs were broken back, front, there's teeth in his stomach, his hands were crushed.
He also talks about how he experienced addiction and how his addiction led him to his final rock bottom.
I was so bored, I went on YouTube and they looked up how to smoke meth.
Rock bottom for him was when he decided to end his life. In this very moment, a loved one reaches out to him and shows him that they have faith in him, that they have his side, they have his corner, that they have hope in him, and that's the moment that he decides to turn his life around and be the person that he is today.
I thought to myself, there's no way this is a coincidence. There's no way these two reached out to me before this day without talking to each other. So I decided to give it one more try, and that's why I'm here.
Today, he talks about his life experiences. He talks about resilience. He talks about finding a sense of self-respect and self-love to lead a happier, better life with himself and have healthier relationships with others. Dale, welcome to Multispective. I am so excited to have you here on the show with us.
Thank you very much. I woke up nice and early for it.
Why don't we start off a little bit from way back when you were born? Where were you born? What was your family like? Are you close to your family members?
Well, I tell people this. My story started before I was born. So my mother was the youngest out of 13 children. Oh, sorry, the youngest girl, pardon me, out of 13 children. And I live in Manitoba, Canada. So she lived up north in Manitoba, which is a province, if some of you aren't familiar. And it was it's a very, very small town. Still is, still very boring. The only thing good about that town is my auntie and my cousins. But she wanted to get away and spread her wings because she was kind of a hippie type. This was before late 70s. So she moved to Toronto, Canada. And unfortunately, she met my father. Now, what she didn't know was that my father was an actual pimp. So my mom fell in love with him. From what I hear, he was a very, very charming man, very handsome. I don't remember it that way. I remember him looking like an ogre, but apparently he was very charming. And she fell in love with him. And once she actually loved him and he knew it, he turned her out and he put her on the street. And she was one of his many, many prostitutes. And he used to sleep with them. And he got her pregnant. And as the story goes that I heard, because he's Italian, he had to marry her. Because her grandparents were from the old country. So he married her. In all the wedding pictures, I'm 6 months in her tummy. So I'm actually in the wedding photos. You just can't see me.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I was born. And as well, back when I used to try to be cool, we'd say I was a product of the game. So, but so things kept up like I had an older sister too. So things kept up like that. And my mother told one of the other girls that she wanted to go back home. This was no life for her kids. She wanted to go back home. So that girl ran to my dad and told him. So he introduced my mother to crack cocaine. Excuse me.
Wow.
So my mom was addicted for about a year. And then she beat that addiction and kept doing whatever in Toronto. Life's falling apart. And my family's begging her to come home, like on her side. And she decided she was going to save up money because my dad thought she was still doing crack, so he's still giving her money, trying to get her, keep her
And
hooked or
this
whatever.
point, like, how old were you at this point when he got her
I
hooked onto
wasn't I
crack?
wasn't old enough to remember yet. Yeah,
Okay.
I wasn't old enough to remember yet, but so when she tried to leave again, they introduced her. Well, my dad introduced her to heroin, and then things really fell apart. And then this is where I start remembering because I remember the parties. I remember people passed out. I do remember some needles. And then I remember a lady starting to come visit us. And every time she left, my mom would be crying. And then
Hmm.
later on, I found out, well, as I got older, I realized it was a social worker. And eventually, when I was
Oh.
5, they took us away. So they apprehended my sister and I. And I remember them telling me, go get your favorite toy. We're going to watch a movie. And then we got in this car and never came home again. So we ended up in emergency
Mm.
placement overnight, emergency placement next day, and then we got tossed to another one. And actually, I got my teeth cleaned yesterday at my dentist, and I told him this story. Um, so when we went to our third foster home in 3 days, I'm pretty sure it was, this guy's like, "You're going to be with us for a while." He's like, "Go pick some hygiene products." And I was like, "What's hygiene?" So I was only 5. So he tells me it's like a toothbrush, it's like soap, that's hygiene. He goes, "Go get your toothbrush stuff." So I picked a Spider-Man cup, a Spider-Man toothbrush, and bubblegum toothpaste. I remember that. So we're lined up and they ring everything through, and I'm still standing there with my toothbrush. And the cashier goes, "Can I see your toothbrush, please?" So I gave it to her. She scanned it, gave it back to me. When she handed it back to me, I looked at it and I started bawling because I realized I was never going home again. And the next year, my mom
How,
actually committed suicide. And so I never did go home again.
wow.
And I don't know what it was. I
That is
think
so
a
intense.
toothbrush means home because it's yours. It's your bathroom, you know. I never traveled, so I didn't know
Right.
you take toothbrushes with you. So, but that's what made me kind of think about like this. The human brain is wired so weird. Like for something like that to traumatize me. And here's the kicker:
Mm.
I that was when I was 5. I never brushed my teeth until 3 years ago. So I went that long without brushing my teeth because I was that toothbrush that day. So
So it was
it was,
like it triggered some serious, like, deep
yeah.
rooted trauma in you.
And I remember like trying to brush my teeth and just like the whole process was okay. Putting toothbrush on once or toothpaste. Once I got here, it was like shaking and like almost tearing up. And it was weird. And I was a
Mm.
grown man. So 3 years ago, I finally realized I need to encourage my son to brush his teeth. I need to show him how to brush his teeth. So I finally got over that 3 years ago for my son. So,
Wow.
but yeah, it's weird
Can
how the
we
brain's connected.
Yeah, I know, like the little like vivid memories that trigger so much, like such deep
Hmm.
trauma, right?
Yeah.
Can you just talk to me a little bit about your sister in this process? Like, she ended up going to the foster homes, jumping from foster home to foster home with you.
With me.
Did you, yeah, so did you develop quite a deep sort of connection and bond with her in that time, or did you sort of like get drifted apart? Like, what
No,
happened with her?
no. We were like, she was my comfort blanket. Like we had to be together. Um, I don't know who promised my mom, but after she died, we were told not to be separated. They couldn't separate us. So when we were in the foster home, we went to another foster home after the hygiene place. We were only there for like a week. And then we went to Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. And there was this foster mom. It was She was cool, but she had like a living room for her real kids and a living room for her foster kids. The one for her real kids had a TV, video game, VCR. Ours had crayons, paper, pens, and maybe a toy or
Mm.
two. So about 4 or 5 months ago, I received 278 pages of documentation of when we were taken away. So I read about the horrific shit that got us taken away. I read about things that happened once we were gone with my mom and my dad. My mom showing up to visits drunk, late, stuff like that. My dad being in prison for doing stuff to my sister. Like it was so horrific reading that stuff. And it just sucked. But in
Mm.
that documentation, I talked about how much I love this foster mother and how comfortable I was there, how safe I was there. Because the big thing that scared me, according to that paperwork, was drinking. I know my parents drank. I know they had disgusting people in our house. like disgusting. Like I'm talking like child predators. They would let party in our home, and um, there was a couple times that my dad would go talk to somebody, and then that person would leave with my sister into her bedroom, and then come out, and my sister was crying, and the guy gave my dad drugs. That's how much of a piece of shit my
Wow.
father was. Yeah, it's just like mind-boggling. So,
Do
yes,
you
I'm reading that
recall
stuff.
anything like it happening to you or anything that made you feel uncomfortable? Like, do you remember
Well, I know a lot of
anything
stuff made me
talking?
feel uncomfortable, but nothing ever went that far with me. Like
Mm,
I honestly think there's two reasons. Either one, my sister put herself in front of me to protect me because she was 3 years older, or number two, because I was my father's biological child. He
mm,
favored me and decided not to do that or put me through whatever. So, but with the foster mom, we talked about like how much we loved her, how comfortable we were, this and that. And then when my uncle and auntie, they were they were supposed to adopt us, but one of my uncles only wanted my sister, didn't want me. So they said, no, we can't do that. We promised your mom we'd keep you together. So then my other uncle was going to adopt me and my sister. And he lives on an Indian reservation. We were supposed to move
mm,
there to an Indian reservation. And that was the plan. And then in the paperwork, it says, like, after saying how much I love Janice, how much, how comfortable I was, how this and that, how much we got along, all of a sudden it says that when we're at the airport leaving, I didn't even say goodbye to her. I ran away. I ran away and got on the plane. So the reason was because she had her father used to come over on the weekends, and I remember that I loved the smell of his pipe tobacco. We were allowed to eat granola cereal when he was around, like just certain things. And then he'd stand at the top of the stairs and he'd sing Teddy Bear's Picnic. I'm not sure if you know the song, but it's a children's song. He'd stand there and he'd sing it till we fell asleep. One night he decided to come in my room and go under my blanket and try to put his hand in my pajamas. So I made a fuss. He left. And then I reported to my foster mom. She got so frigging mad at me, like just lost her mind. So my mom, the day of my mom's funeral, she like was helping me get dressed, and she pulled down my zipper, pulled down my underwear, grabbed my penis, pulled it out of the hole, and started like pulling it, saying, "Is this what your fucking dad used to do to you?" Like just angry because they suspected something happened to me too with my dad, but it never did. But they suspected it. And then she did that so much that my penis cut on my zipper. Like that's how bad she was doing that. And that was the day of my mother's funeral. So we're at the funeral. Afterwards, I go to my social worker and I tell my social worker what happened. She tells me,
mm.
"You guys are moving soon. Can you hang in there and be brave?" And I'm like, what the fuck? I was like, okay. I'm like 6 years old. I'm scared because I just reported two things within recent
Mm.
and did not get the reaction that I hoped for. So I decided, yeah, we are moving. I'm going to tough it out, blah, blah, blah. Can't wait to move. And then it happens two more times. Once in the bathtub. I'm sitting in the bathtub, and we used to have to say, "Mom, can I be excused from the table? Mom, can I be excused from the bathtub?" And she reached in the bathtub and like went like this and squeezed like as hard as she could to my penis. And I remember it hurting for like a week to pee. And then when I was getting out of the tub another time, she did it again. Same thing, squeezed, and it was just painful as hell. So, yeah, finally, when we got to leave, I ran to that plane. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't want to see her no more. I did not want to even look at her.
Mm.
So,
I mean, it's just
oh,
like
yeah,
so much like you just being surrounded by, the people that you're supposed to like trust and feel secure around, the very first ones, your own parents, being
yeah,
involved in drugs and, that being a really unsafe, dangerous environment for you. And then moving to another environment, which is meant to be safer by a system that's meant to protect you, all of
mhm,
which have just continuously failed you and your
yeah,
sister too. And like,
yeah,
feeling like you just have no place to turn and no one to talk to. I can't even begin to imagine like what kind of like trauma must have set in that process, and how it must have been so hard for you to trust in anyone going
yeah,
forward.
yeah. That was a big thing too. And when my fiance slash ex-wife. I'm not sure if I told you, but I'm remarrying the woman I divorced. So, but
Interesting. We'll
yeah,
get there.
when we read that paperwork together, she just looked at me with like the saddest eyes, and she's like, "You've been surviving your whole life, right?" And I was like, "Pretty
Yeah.
much." And I never heard it put like that, but it's true. Yeah, it's been hard, but and the thing that sucks really bad is when we moved with my uncle to the Indian reservation, we had to go to Sunday school. So that first Sunday school, I told the native preacher, because there was a white guy and a native guy, and I told the native preacher, I was like, my mom just died, and that's why I moved here. And he's like, you need prayer and healing. So he took me to this little office, and that white guy lit a candle and started talking and telling me, like, that's so sad. How old are you? Blah, blah, blah. And then boom, he got me. He molested me. And that was like right after, like, I wasn't even a week from being there, being in the new community. Just coming from a place where two people didn't do shit when I reported what happened to me. So now I'm standing here, like, wondering what the fuck? Like, is this what adults do to kids? Like, it's so common. Like, is this what's supposed to happen? And then I had to go to Sunday school the next time, and I didn't want to talk to that guy. And he's like, I'm so sorry. He's like, blah, blah, blah. What did he say again? He's like, the devil got into me or something. And he's like, I asked God for forgiveness. And then he asked me for help trimming trees outside. And then he did the ultimate sexual assault. And I was 6 years old. And
What do you mean when you say the ultimate sexual
like, he actually raped me. Yeah. Like penetration. So, and I was 6 years old. And then I remember him saying, if you tell anybody, I'm going to make sure you go back to foster care. And the thing is, the foster home I was in was with a agency called Catholic Children's Aid Society. So I didn't know there's different kind of churches like Lutheran and all that other Presbyterian. I didn't know all that stuff. I just knew Catholic meant God. I'm at a church, which means God. And this guy just said, if I say anything, he's going to make sure I go back to foster care. Foster care is Christian Children's Aid Society, or Catholic Children's Aid Society, sorry. So in my head, he's not bluffing because the church, Catholic, blah, 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 and I believed him. And he did it the following week again after talking me into trusting him. I have no fucking idea how. But then I went home and I looked at my uncle and I just told him, I was like, I don't want to go to Sunday school no more. And I think he saw something in my eyes and he was just like, you don't have to go. And he looked concerned and it looked like he wanted to talk more, but my uncle wasn't really he was a great man, taught me so much, great, great man, but he just didn't know how to show emotions. So he gave me a look and it felt like he wanted to go further, like ask me what's going on, but he never did. He just said, I don't have to go anymore.
Was there anyone else that you told about this? Any of your classmates, anyone your age
Nope.
that may have, or your sister? Like,
Nope.
did you felt that you felt close to your sister? Did you feel comfortable enough to tell her?
I remember wanting to tell her, but I didn't. Okay, how do I word this? This is such a fucked up thought. Like, pardon my language, but I don't want to say steal her shine because that's nothing to be proud of. But I didn't want to say, well, this happened to me too. Thinking that, like, I'm saying, oh, that happened to you. Look at all the attention you're getting because of it. Look at all these people that feel bad for you. Well, it happened to me too. Like, I don't want to make it look like I was doing that, Like trying to say, oh, well, she said it, so all these people are treating her nice. So let me try it. So I never said nothing to my sister. Never told anybody. I moved to a foster home in Winnipeg, Canada, where I met two of the greatest people in my life, which was my foster dad and his worker, his respite worker. And we used to have to sit in a circle and talk about our past. But I was so many times I wanted to bring it up, but these other boys were there. So I trusted Scott so much, but these other boys were there. I didn't want to say that in front of them. I don't want them thinking I'm a wuss. I don't want them thinking this and that.
you'd moved to your foster father's place where you actually felt a sense of comfort. You felt like you could trust him, but you didn't want to say it at that point, given, of course, the circumstance that there were other boys, there were other people around, and there was a sense of like maybe shame around the
Mhm.
idea of being, a sexual or having some kind of sexual relationship or something with another male. And
Mhm.
what then led to you going to a youth center? You mentioned a youth center, like a
Yeah,
detention center?
yeah.
Yeah, what
It was
happened
youth
then that
lockup.
day?
I ended up
Yeah.
assaulting one of my foster brothers. But the thing is, I didn't realize, as my foster dad explained it, because he was really upset that day too. And what happened was, I assaulted one of my foster brothers, and then I didn't realize Scott's home, it was called a level 5 foster home. So it's like for people with they need not special needs, but they need more attention. They need more hands on. They need somebody to be there with them all the time. That's called a level 5 foster home. He told me I think he said I was a level 2. And he said, "You're only here because I love you. He's here because he needs to be." He goes, "You don't realize what you did." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You have to go now." And I was like, "Fuck." And I love this man. I still do. I call him dad. I call him pop. Mom and pop. I still talk to them. They live 15 minutes away from me. But
Wow.
yeah, it
What led
fucking.
you to assault him, to hurt him?
So this guy, he was special needs, but he always tried to get on my nerves. Always try to bug me. Always try to bug me. So in the basement, we had stairs without a railing, and it's straight cement on the floor. And he's sitting there throwing dog food at me. And then he's like, "Ah, fuck you, this and that, blah blah blah." And I'm ignoring him. I'm playing my Super Nintendo. And then he goes to get up, and he's like, "Ah, fuck you, good for you. Your mom died." And I was like, "Who?" So I paused it, walked up to him. He sat back down on the steps, and I gave him a left hook. And that was a left hook that changed my life. He fell off the side of the stairs, hit his head. He was okay, but I honestly thought I killed him the way everyone was reacting. Scott was kind of emotional.
Oh,
So I was like, did I kill him? Did I kill him? So yeah.
wow.
So I had to go to emergency placement because, like I said,
Can
he needed that place. I didn't.
can you tell me, like in that moment, obviously, probably when after you hit him, you kind of had this realization that like, oh God, I just hurt someone. Was there a part of you that also felt a sense
No,
of relief? Like it was the first time you gained control over all this pent up anger that you had inside of you? Or were you just
no.
immediately
No,
Mhm.
I was a rugby player, so like that's where I took out all my anger. But when I hit him, I was happy. I didn't realize the scope of it until because I came upstairs and I told the worker, I was like, "Andy, I just hit blah blah blah." And then he ran downstairs and he's like, "What the?" So he runs up. He's like, "Scott, blah, blah, blah." Tells him. He goes downstairs. He comes up. "You don't realize what you did. You don't realize what you did." And I was like, "Did I kill him?" And I started panicking. Like, "Did I kill him?" And then, so I didn't
Mhm.
realize I didn't realize I fucked up until like 20 minutes later when
Gotcha.
Scott explained he was level 5. I wasn't. So, but I had to go to emergency placement. And then Scott moved with my favorite respite worker, Becky, and they moved to the country where we live now.
Mhm.
And in my mind, he abandoned me because I was
Mm.
only 13, 12, 13. So I was young. I didn't understand all this stuff. I didn't understand the politics of foster care. I just felt like he got mad at me. He threw me away when I absolutely
Mhm.
loved this man, cherished him. So
Right.
I went back to the house they moved out of, the house where I threw that punch, and brought my friends there, and we smashed it up. $30,000 damage. Like we ripped out sinks, toilets. My friends thought we were having fun. Meanwhile, I'm like just getting my emotions out. In my head, I'm like, why
Crazy.
did you leave me? Like, why the fuck did you leave me here? My friends think we're having fun just being assholes, but it was so
Mhm.
emotional for me. And I thought I was getting
Wow.
back at him for leaving me. So we end up passing out. A real estate agent comes the next day to show the house, and we're all sleeping in the living room. So they called the cops. So
Oh gosh.
yeah, so that's my first charge. That's why I ended up in youth lockup. So,
Right.
but yeah,
And how long were you there for?
was only in the actual Manitoba Youth Center for, I think, a week. And then I got bail, but then they put me in a locked group home setting. It was called Seven Oaks. There was a girls' cottage, a boys' cottage. There were just magnets on the door. That's all. We were supposed to be locked in there, but I
Oh,
always popped the doors open and we all ran. Come back 4 days later, get in trouble. So it was,
wow. Is this also like a juvenile delinquency, like a kind
it
of
was
like a
for,
mini prison?
it was like for the people that just got out of there, that got bail, that had conditions. So you would go from
Right.
I guess the kids' prison. You get bail from there, and you'd go to Seven Oaks, where it's more.
Interesting.
Um, there's more observation. There's more like things are locked up. Your rooms are locked up at night, stuff like that. So it
Right.
wasn't actually a group home; it was more secure.
Right. And
Yeah.
you had like therapy sessions and stuff during this in this
They
place?
tried. They tried. They had counselors and stuff.
Yeah.
For me, I didn't start talking to a counselor until almost 2 years ago, my whole life. Because everybody's like, oh, your mom killed herself. Let's talk. But I didn't like
Mm.
the thought of somebody that read a book sitting there telling me, well, I read this book, so this means you have to feel like this. You know,
Mm.
I'd rather have
Yeah.
somebody that's been through it, someone that lost their mother, somebody that lost somebody close to them to suicide, somebody whose parents were addicts, like somebody that could relate to me. I didn't want some guy in a suit saying,
Mhm.
well, you must feel like this because chapter 4 said that.
Right.
When I got out of prison, I became an addict. So that numbed everything. But about
Right.
3, 4 months ago, because I was off drugs, I finally had to start dealing with my childhood bullshit. So finally, I had to admit to my fiance first that I was molested by my foster home out of anger. I
Mm.
was raped by a priest. You know, so that finally came
Yeah.
out because I had no reason to hide it no more. I had nothing to hide behind anymore. I was off drugs, I was clean,
Mm.
sober, and there was no reason to be tough anymore. And the
Right.
scary thing was, I thought she was going to look at me as less of a man because of it. But she told me that brought us closer because I actually trusted her to
Mm.
talk about that with her.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting at earlier. Sorry, I was skipping, but I just wanted to tell you why it finally came out, why it
Yeah,
took
fair enough.
42 years to, or 36 years to finally come out. So that's why.
And that's the thing. Once you open that faucet and you let yourself be vulnerable, in a way, it's scary. It's daunting because you don't know
Oh,
how
yeah.
other people that you love and care about might respond. But at the same time,
Yeah.
in a way, it's kind of empowering because now you've gotten that story out. It's out there. It's all
Yeah.
raw. It's all open, and now you can start the healing process,
Yeah.
which was not possible when it was all blocked out.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that priest, what happened that when I couldn't sleep till like 2:30 in the morning, my teachers used to beat me up when I was in grade 2 and 4 because, like, on the Indian Reserve, the white teachers used to beat us up. Have you ever heard of residential schools in
Yeah.
Canada? Okay,
Like boarding
so
school kind of thing.
it's like boarding school, but they used to like actually physically take Native kids away from their family and put them in these schools, cut their hair. If you spoke your language, you got the whip. They've just been finding unmarked graves of children outside these churches and residential schools in Canada. They found 215 in Kamloops, BC. So that started this whole movement to dig around old residential schools, old churches, and they've been finding like unmarked graves of children. So,
My
and
gosh.
there's stories of survivors that are just they're horrific, like fucking horrific, like ugh. Like these people because it was priests and nuns, and they're getting children pregnant and stuff, and then disposing of that. Like there's been survivors telling their stories on the news, everything. There's been this whole movement in the last few years. It's called Truth and Reconciliation, where everybody's coming forward and telling their story. And now the government's trying to make it right. So, so I went to Indian day school, which was a residual of residential school. And so my white teachers used to beat me up. All my native teachers from the community were awesome, but the white ones used to beat me up. So, oh yeah. So one night I couldn't sleep. So I looked up one of the teachers used to beat me up, couldn't find his name. And then I thought about the priest. So I looked up the priest name and it said that he was one of the most prolific pedophiles in Canada. He has estimated between 500, 600 victims. He got convicted for 60 victims and only did 6 years for it. And yeah, he's still alive. He's living in British Columbia. And yeah, and then I found out there was a class action lawsuit against him. So, but the church gave him an airplane because he had a pilot's license. So he used to fly to remote communities in northern Manitoba and northern Ontario as a Boy Scout leader and as a priest. And little did they know he was doing his thing up there.
To
Has
think that
been
you were kind of briefly a part of that system as well, that you
yeah,
didn't even know of until much later, right?
yeah, and that's the thing too. Us talking to my niece because September 30th is called Red Shirt Day or Orange Shirt Day, sorry, which is also um, Truth and Reconciliation Day, which they're making a holiday. And I think it's already a holiday in Manitoba, but they're trying to do it in Canada. And it's amazing how many people wear orange shirts in memory of residential school survivors. So my niece messaged me one day, just said, "Hey, Uncle, I know it's a hard day for you, and blah blah blah. I just want to tell you I love you, and I'm thinking about you." So it is kind of a little
Like a
like hard for me when I think about it, just because the beatings, like no kid should go through that. But I also know from what I've heard from elders and stuff that I went through nothing compared to what they went through, what they seen and stuff. So
So you go to the youth center and you've done your time there. You've gone to the Seven Oaks. You've done your time there as well, and you come back out. What happens then?
by then I'm too big for foster homes, and I'm too manipulative for group homes. So at 15 years old, they're just like, you know what? Fuck it. We're just going to get you your own apartment. So I moved out on my own when I was 15, which is pretty cool because they paid
So
my rent. They paid my bills. I got grocery money. Plus,
who
if I
was this
worked,
that paid for this?
it's called McDonald Youth Services. So it's like an agency because the thing is, once we were in foster care, my mom died and everything, we became a crown ward of Manitoba. So that means the province of Manitoba, Canada was our legal guardians. So they're responsible for us until we were 18. So when they couldn't find
Oh,
a home for me,
right.
they cut a check. Here's your rent. Here's your groceries. If you work a normal job, any money you get, we can't touch. So it's like,
And
cool.
15 years old is too old for foster homes? I thought you would
No,
be
I was
put
too
into the
big.
foster system until 8.
It's like
Too
I
big.
was too big. Like they thought I looked like the staff. Everywhere I went. First time I went to the youth center, I was
Right.
13, and the guy's like, "Are you staff?" I was like, "No, I'm your roommate, man." So
Wow.
yeah.
Can you tell me about where your sister is at this point when you went to the youth
Um,
center?
oh, my sister was still in. No, she was in a group home actually. She was in a group home. She still came and visit me and everything.
So I guess that time when you were given rent money to live on your own, you're 15 years old, you're fresh out of like this Seven Oaks
Yes.
youth center. You're still in that rebellion phase, I guess. You're still pent up anger, you're still feeling rage, and now you have freedom on top of that.
Yes.
What do you do next?
Uh, well, I had a full beard when I was 13, so I used to go to the bars every night because yeah. And then they were trying to get me to go to school, and every school I went to, I just didn't like it. And once again, everybody thought I was an adult already. So, like, I'm sitting in this class with all these fresh faced eighth graders or ninth graders. Actually, by then, I guess I would have been in, yeah, grade 9 or 10 when I moved on.
Right.
And I'm sitting with all these people who look like little kids, and I'm sitting there with a beard, barely fit in my desk. And it felt so uncomfortable. So, yeah. But the highest grade I
But
finished, because getting in trouble and stuff, was grade 7. But then while I was in prison the first time, I got my high school equivalent. So I'm
right.
kind of educated a little bit.
Right.
It's enough to
It's
get
still
by.
pretty amazing, though, that at that point you kind of still tried to make it to school, even though you were not really feeling it because you didn't have anyone to really like, push you to go at that
Yeah,
time.
that's another thing.
Um,
Yeah.
what landed you in prison the first time?
So the first time, um, I'll give you the quick version. Girl I grew up with, there was a bunch of us sitting around at my place, and at the time I worked with the Manitoba Youth and Care Network, which was like almost like a children's advocate. So she asked me if I'd ever worked with kids that were molested. And I said, not directly, but like there's stuff I do for kids like that, but I don't counsel them. I don't work one-on-one with them or nothing like that. And I was like, why'd you ask that? And she's like, never mind. I was like, no, for real. Like, you don't just ask a question like that and leave it. So she told me that her father was convicted 3 times of molesting her and her 3 sisters. So the first time, he only got 3 months, followed by, and this is why she was asking me. She said, is this normal? He got 3 months in jail, followed by 3 months house arrest, where he legally had to stay in the same house as his victims. So that's why she was asking me that question. Did you ever hear of this before? And I was like, fuck no. I was like, that was the worst miscarriage of justice I've ever seen for a victim. So obviously it happens again. This time he gets 12 months, followed by 3 months house arrest. And then it happens again, and he gets 18 months, followed by 3 months house arrest. So each time they threw him back to his victims. And yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So, like, I don't know.
Is this a thing?
I know about house arrest and stuff, and I know about that. Like, when you're on, you can get this much time and this much house arrest, but I've never seen somebody sent back to their victims. But that was his address. That's where
you would think at least it would take the 2 girls. Yeah, like you would think they would take the 2 girls out of the house.
4 girls.
Right.
Yeah. So, and the mom stayed with him throughout this until the last one happened. So the night he tells me this, one of my friends borrowed money off me. And then my other friend, after he left, they're like, I thought you didn't like crack. And I was like, I don't. They're like, you don't like drugs? And I was like, no, I don't. And then they're like, well, he borrowed $40 to go buy crack. And I was like, what? No way. And they're like, yeah, he's a crackhead. And I was like, what the fuck? So I went to go try to find him where I know he hangs out. And I couldn't find him. I looked for him for 2 hours because I didn't know about drugs back then. So I didn't know if you got money for drugs, you're going right away to go get them. Like, you're not hanging out. You're going to get your drugs right away. I didn't know that. So I went to go look for him for 2 hours, couldn't find him. And then this was back in 99, so there's a payphone there. And I called a cab. So I'm waiting for the cab. No, I'm on the phone, sorry, with the cab company. And there's a guy coming across the street. And he's like, who are you on the phone with? And I said, Unicity Taxi. And he's like, ask for 2 of them. So I said, okay. So I asked for 2, hung up the phone. So as we're waiting for the taxis, we start talking. And then he goes, you're a funny motherfucker. He's like, what's your name? And I was like, Dale Turcotte. I shook his hand. I said, what's your name? And he tells me. And my heart starts beating. I'm like, that's her fucking dad. Because his first name was Kim, which is very rare for a man if you're not Asian. And the last name was a really weird Portuguese name, I think. So I was just like, this is her fucking dad. Like 4 hours after she told me what he did, he approached me. Like, I had no physical description. I didn't know if he was black, white, tall, short, fat, curly hair, bald. I knew nothing except his name. So I was like, holy shit. So I said, who are you drinking with? Because he had a case of beer. And he goes, nobody. And I said, well, I'll pay for the half the beer. He goes, you pay for the cab. So I said, okay. So my plan was I was just going to beat the shit out of him for what he did to these girls. So we go to his house. And sure enough, we walk in and there's a framed picture of my friend. So I knew for sure it was him. So we're sitting around for a bit. I'm pretending to drink. I didn't crack my beer. I was pretending to take sips. And then I go to the bathroom. I come out and I point to her picture and I'm like, I said, is that blah, blah, blah? And he's like, yeah. He goes, that's my princess. I was like, well, yeah. I said, I know what you did to your daughters, man. And he just kind of looked at me. And the thing I forgot to mention was when he took off his jacket, he was like one of the biggest people I've ever seen, like muscle-wise. So I thought I was done. But I was so angry at what he did that I didn't care. So I thought I was going to get the shit kicked out of me, but like I said, I was so mad. So when I confronted him, he squared up. Well, I squared up, and then it looked like he kind of did, but it was a weird stance. And then as soon as he moved, I threw 3 punches. I missed every single one of them. And then he reached out and he grabbed my dick. So when he grabbed my dick, I lost it. I backhanded him. The fight was on. And I would like to say I did it 100% because he was a pervert, because what he did to his daughters. But I do have to admit, when he did that to me, I wasn't a 18-year-old, 320-pound man anymore. I became that 6-year-old boy again. Like, it did something in my head as soon as he grabbed me there. Like it just put me in victim stance or victim mode, where I felt I had to protect this little tiny Dale that got raped. So I ended up beating the living shit out of him. And then when we were in court, the things they said in court, like I said, I'm not going to get into the details because when they read the autopsy report in court, I couldn't remember doing half of that stuff to him. Like he was, like his ribs were broken back, front. There's teeth in his stomach. His hands were crushed. His back was broken in 4 places. Skull fractures. Like, and I don't remember doing half that stuff to him. So I just
fully
blacked.
dismembered.
Yeah,
Right.
like just blacked right out. So
Wow.
yeah. And like I said, like I'd love to say it was 100% because he was a pervert, but it had to do with me becoming a victim again by him doing that.
Right.
So, so my lawyer was pretty smart though, because I got charged with 2nd-degree murder, and my lawyer came and asked me, "What do you want from me?" And I said, "I'll do 10 years, I'll do 20 years. I just don't want life. Just make sure I don't get life." Because in Canada, when you get life, you're on parole until the day you die. So, say like me and my fiance, and I got life. Me and my fiance, she can accuse me of pushing her. I go back to jail for 2 years before they even review it. So, and that's for the rest of your life. So, and then in 2 years, they're like, "Okay, this really happened. Even if you're innocent, okay, go ahead. You're still on parole though." So that's why I told my lawyer, "I'll do 10, I'll do 20. I just don't want life." So he came back the next day. He said, "If you plead out to manslaughter tomorrow," he goes, "you'll get 6 to 10. So I said, "Okay." So we go to court. The Crown attorney is asking for 10 years. My lawyer's asking for 7 years. And what my lawyer did was he made sure we had a female judge that had kids because of the situation. Because obviously she would read that guy's criminal record. She'd read the particulars of everything. So the judge ended up giving me 6 years. So yeah. So 1 year less than my lawyer was asking for. So he's a smart man.
That's
So, yeah.
Looking back, do you wish you did things differently, and if so, how?
Honestly, like, to tell you the honest truth, I don't wish I did it differently. And there's 2 reasons behind that answer. Number 1, because I think I ended up where I needed to be. Things had to happen the way they did in order for me to get where I am. And well, I'll tell you something just after this. Okay, so there's that answer because of that. The second answer, or the second reason, his daughter showed up to court with my family. And when I was in remand, awaiting trial, I got a card in the mail, and there was no return address. I opened it, and it was a graduation picture of his second oldest daughter. So to me, that was like her saying, "Thank you for my life back," because they were so terrified of him. And I remember standing there with there was 2 gangsters beside me, and we're looking at that picture, and I explained to them that, and all 3 of us are standing there crying in the middle of the jail. So, but yeah, so that meant a lot. That's what it meant to me, was I gave her life back and she was thanking me. So, and they all, like I said, they all showed up at court with my family. So I think I saved those girls. I saved them, and I made them feel more safe in the world. And with people like that, with actual monsters like that, like, you don't know how many other victims he had or would have had. So I don't regret what I did in the least. And like I said, I ended up where I needed to be. And one of the things I also tell people sometimes is, the last time I remember being truly happy was when I was 6 years old at the foster home. The day they told me my mom died, because we thought we were going to visit her. Because the visit before, I asked my mom, "Why can't we come home with you yet?" And she goes, "Oh no," I said, "How come we can't come home with you?" And she's like, "I'm sorry, my boy. Like, I'm sick. I'm going through blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Fuck you. You don't love me anymore. Or you don't love us anymore." That's what I said to my mom at 6 years old. So I go back to the transport van, because they had a van that take us to visits and back to our foster home. So I went and sat in the back of the van for the rest of the visit. And then my sister came in. She's like, "Dale, you got to realize mom's sick. Once she's better, we'll go home." So my mom missed the next visit, and my sister was telling me that again, don't be mean to mom. Tell her you love her. So I couldn't wait to sit on her lap, give her a hug, whatever. So we're upstairs. My sister's helping me get dressed for the visit. And then we hear our foster mom go, Dale, Lisa. So we come burning down the stairs thinking we're going to visit. And all of a sudden there's my social worker, my foster mom, and my dad's attorney for some reason. And then we stopped and we're like, what the hell? And they told us to go in her real kid's living room. So we knew something major was up. And that's when we found out she died. And the thing is, like I said, the last time I remember being truly happy was running down those stairs thinking I was going to see my mom to apologize. And it took until a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that I finally felt true happiness again. So, like I said, things in my life happened the way they had to. So, and I don't regret killing somebody like that. I can honestly say that. I think I made the world safer. And I know it's not my place to decide who lives and dies, but I do think I made it safer. And yeah, so I don't regret that at all. I never apologized for it once.
Did you feel a sense of pride that you protected someone?
Oh, yeah.
And was that sort of like, reverberated
Yeah.
in prison as well? Is that what the kind of way people were responding to you in prison too?
Once they knew I was there, or once they knew I was there, because it's always in the paper and stuff. So the guards weren't that harsh on me. The inmates were welcoming, but also like I grew up in foster homes and group homes. So a lot of the guys that were already in prison, I grew up with. So I had an easy time because of that. I had an easy time because what I did, like the kind of person I killed. And then another thing, if if you don't like us getting into this topic, you can cut it out. But in Canadian prisons, they don't rape each other. You hear about prison, you hear about rape, you hear about this. So when I first got there, we're in what you call is the fish tank. They put you in this place for 3 days. 3 months, and they assess you. They do all these tests, really dumb tests. Like there were some questions on there like, do you wish your father was a florist? Do you like flowers? Do you wish your mother was a mechanic? Like just, it's so weird. And there's about 500 questions. Yeah, so they assess you and they figure out if you're medium security, minimum security, or maximum security. So that's why they do that. While we were in there, this guy that I think it was vehicular manslaughter. So he didn't live that life. He didn't live a gangster life. He got drunk and killed somebody. So he knew nothing about criminals, nothing like that. And he ended up raping somebody in there, thinking that if you rape someone, you have status now, like you're somebody. He didn't realize that we frown upon that in Canada, and we kicked the living shit out of this guy. And then he had to go to protective custody. And I made a comment about this on YouTube, and somebody's like, "Holy shit!" Even the prisoners in Canada are polite, because with the victim, we made sure he had canteen. We gave up our phone time so he can talk to his family, like the one that got raped. So we made sure he had phone times to talk to his family so that he can be around people he loves. We made sure his family had rides to the prison for visits, just to make sure his mental was taken care of because of what happened to him.
Wow.
So yeah. So, but it was funny when someone said that on YouTube.
Crazy. What are some of the other things in prison that are regarded with respect and regarded with absolute no, like we don't accept this kind of stuff? Like
the worst thing you could be is a pedophile. The worst. Or no, sorry. The worst thing you'd be is a child killer. And then a pedophile.
Killer.
Yeah, a child killer, yeah. That's the worst thing. And then a pedophile. And then somebody that either robbed, assaulted, or killed the elderly. And then there's the rats. Then you can't be a rat. You can't be then there's people like it's weird in Canada. There's guys that have killed their women. They'd be in a domestic partnership or whatever, or a marriage, and they beat their woman to death or lose it and kill them. And first, like, I never understood it, but there's some of them that were in population that were living amongst everybody else, and everyone was okay with it. But I didn't associate with those guys. And then there was guys that killed their women that were frowned upon, and not in population. So I never knew what the difference was, but I guess some people knew the specifics of everything. And so I don't know if they did
Hmm.
something after they were dead that was gross or whatever, but
Did you at
so I
any
never understood
point
that.
come across any child molesters or
Oh,
child
can you hear
killers?
me?
And like, what was that like
Oh,
for you, knowing that you'd gone through something like that when you were younger?
if somebody came in and I knew him and I knew he was a good guy, I'd vouch for him. I'd introduce him to everybody. I'd vouch for him, tell him he's a good guy. If guys came in that we didn't know, one of us would phone our girlfriend and say, hey, Google this name. And they Google it and then tell us his charges. So we're like, okay, you got to go or you can stay. Or if it was bad, we'd
Mm.
act like everything was okay in the middle of a card game, invite him in one of the cells to either have a cigarette or something and just beat the shit if he was a bad guy. So, but
Right.
yeah, with the whole, the pedophile thing, I ended up in the gym with one of them in the gym bathroom, not realizing that he wasn't in protective custody. They tried to put him in population and I knew exactly who he was. I knew what he's there for. And we ended up in the bathroom together in the gym. And I was just like, fuck. So when I kicked the shit out of him, I had to keep in mind, you already did this. If you kill this guy, you're going to get second degree murder. You're going to get life because I already had a manslaughter. It was to the same kind of person.
Mm.
So they would see that because first degree is obviously premeditated. You planned to kill the person, you carried it out. Second degree
Right.
is in the middle of something, you realize the person was going to die and you kept going. So that's what
Mm.
would have happened to me. So I kicked the shit out of him, reminded myself, don't go that far, and got out of there. And um, that felt really good, though. That felt good to get that out. So,
Wow.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I can really sense that there was a lot of like built up like anger and just rage at
Mm.
the sight or the thought of anyone that hurt children. What did you do to finally cope with that?
What I just started talking about it in therapy, like maybe 3 months ago. I started therapy with this one guy, and we finally just started talking about that last week about what happened.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
um, so I can't say I coped with it. I've been able to keep it repressed, keep everything in there, and just remind
Mm,
myself like don't pop off because there's
yeah.
people in the community. It's a small community, and there's people here that have done that, and I just need to avoid them. And I need to tell myself, you have a family now, you have a life now. It's not worth it. If it was up to me, there'd be a couple hit and runs, but I got to
Yeah.
remind myself that I have a family and stuff. And the thing is too, um, this is gonna sound weird, I think, but I am so glad that I was a strong enough person and I was able, even though I had parents like that, I was able to pull morals out of somewhere. But I'm so glad that I did not repeat the cycle because I know a
Mm,
lot of people that went through that repeated that cycle, that became that kind of person. And I'm glad that
mm,
mine turned into hatred instead of desire. Does that make sense?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I'm very thankful
You
of.
you did mention um like off the record that there was one cycle that you sort of picked up from your parents, which was more to do with the drugs and the alcohol. Can you talk me through that?
Um, okay. So this, like, it wasn't planned to become I don't think anyone plans to become a drug addict.
Yeah.
But what happened was, when I was on the run. Okay, I got out of prison, and I was on parole, and then I was wanted for breaching parole. So I went to Vancouver to go see my sister and her kids, and then I got to be in a short Canadian film while I was there. And I thought the whole process was so cool. So when I got locked up again, I started looking into writing screenplays, and then I wrote one. Well, I wrote a few, and there was something about it that was bugging me. Like it was done, but there was something bugging me, and I rewrote it and I rewrote it and I went through everything and I just couldn't find it. So fast forward, I don't know, 5, 6 months, I help a friend fix her car. and she gives me a little baggie of meth, like 2 points of meth. And I'm like, no, go ahead. I don't do drugs. And at this point, the only drug I ever did was I smoked weed once in a while. And then when I was 16, I did acid. That was about it. So I told her, I was like, here, no, you take it. I don't do drugs. And she's like, no, you can sell it. It's like $20. I was like, no, I already got in trouble for selling drugs. But, oh yeah, because my second time I went to jail was for selling drugs. So we can get into that. But, so I told her, no. And she's like, just take it. And she wouldn't let up. So I took it, went home, threw it on my fridge, forgot about it. So, I ended up finding it one day, and then I told my girlfriend at the time about it. And as a joke, she went and bought me like a meth pipe, like a bubble. She's like, here. I was like, fuck off. Like, and she was bugging me though. And then I threw that on the fridge. And then one night, I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my screenplay, and I can't. And it's bugging me. So I unplug everything from the computer, plug it all back in, try again, nothing. Unplug it, thinking that'll reset my brain. And then I had enough of that. So try to get a hold of my friends, see if they want to come drink. Nobody. Come smoke weed. Nobody. You got anybody need a ride? Like, I'm so bored. I got to get my head out of this. Nobody. So I was so bored. I went on YouTube and I looked up how to smoke meth. And then I smoked the meth that was there. And then all of a sudden, everything about my screenplay that was wrong just shot to the front of my head. And I was like, holy shit. Plug in the computer, fixed everything. My other screenplay, put it in. Oh, this is wrong. Fixed all that. Like, just craziness. So, it's true what they say, meth, don't even try it once, because I was hooked, and then I was hooked for 2 years, and we lost everything. Like, she was a welder for 9 years. She lost everything. And this is my ex. This is my fiance. My fiance is normal. But yeah, we lost everything. We lost our vehicle, everything. And then, finally we broke up, and then I discovered fentanyl, and holy shit. So I ended up straight, like, actually homeless on fentanyl for 5 years, I think. And just like I overdosed once and I died for 3 minutes, they said. And I still went back to it. Like, after I came out of the hospital, I still went back to it. I had friends die right beside me. I still smoked it. Like, I seen the worst shit happen on that stuff, and I still went back to it. I went to jail again. I needed work. So my buddy's like, well, you want to collect money for me? I was like, sure. He's a drug dealer. So I said, yeah. So I did that. I was collecting money for him, and then all of a sudden everyone was scared to borrow money off him or borrow drugs off him because everyone was paid. I was very violent. And then, yeah, he actually sat me down. He invited me over for supper and said, hey, you're not in a movie, right? And I was like, what? He's like, this isn't Scarface, right? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're big enough that you could just threaten them. Like, you don't have to do what you're doing. Like, you're scaring people. To have a drug dealer sit you down and say that to you, it's like, what the. So after that, I ended up driving for his brother. Then his brother got sick one day, so I was like, well, just give me the bag. I'll go sell it. So I started doing that, and then I started going on my own. Then I did my own thing, and then within 2 years, I was selling kilos. And little did I know, they started an operation on me out here. We have a national park called Clear Lake. We live 15 minutes from. And yeah, some little guy approached me, and next thing you know, he became my friend. He's with me for 3 months. Had no idea he was an undercover cop. And I sold him and his buddy a kilogram of cocaine. So, but me and him sold 3 kilos before that together, him and I. And then, so I think they were waiting to get me for more than that, but I got my friend pregnant. So I told him, hey, I have a kid on the way. I think this is going to be my last deal. I'm going to put the money away. I got job skills. I can live comfortably. So I think he ended up telling them, hey, this is our last shot to get him. So sure enough, they got me. And then I got 6 years and 1 month. So I got 1 month more for drugs than I did for killing somebody. I remember coming home once. Well, I was driving with my wife, or my fiance, and we're sitting outside, and we were talking about my mom for some reason. And I was clean by now. So I was like, if I got clean, why couldn't she? Like, why weren't we important enough to her to quit drugs? Why didn't she love us enough to quit drugs? Like, and I was freaking out, and I got all emotional and shit. And then I remember thinking about it later, and I was like, okay, I risked my family to go back to drugs 3 times. I died and still did it. Friends died in front of me, and I still didn't. And I finally thought about the power of addiction. And then I thought,
Mm.
back then in 1987, they didn't have social media. So you couldn't reach out to friends when you felt weak. They
Yeah.
didn't have RAM clinics, which stands for rapid access to addiction medicine, which is what helped me get clean. They didn't have that back then. They didn't have Addictions Foundation in Manitoba back then. They didn't have any resources for
Mm.
people that were addicted to something. So my mom had no
Yeah.
help. She was on her own. And she
Mm.
committed suicide by taking a lethal dose of heroin on purpose. So
Mm.
so it went from me to,
Was that sort of like the first time for you that you felt a sense of like deep empathy for your mom and a deep
yeah,
sort of like understanding? Like, did you
yeah,
forgive her in a sense in
I
that
did.
very moment?
I did.
Yeah.
That night, after freaking out, after yelling basically at my dashboard while my fiance listened, I found that night when I thought about it, I actually forgave her for that. And
Yeah.
um like if it wasn't for the RAM clinic, if it wasn't for social media, if it wasn't for me reaching out to people that when I needed help, when I was at my lowest, I wouldn't be here.
Mm.
So like
For sure.
I'll tell you the reason. Okay, this is one of the big stories I tell when I talk about um, holding on to hope and not letting go. So 6.5 years ago, I saved a guy passed out in a snowbank, and I got frostbite on my legs, and my legs they're still not healed. I go every 2 days for bandage changes, but they are just they're so painful. And I was an addict, so I wasn't going to the hospital when I had to.
Mm.
In winter, my legs would freeze because the wounds would drip, so my legs were wet constantly. And then the in the winter it would freeze, and my legs would freeze even more, and it was already frostbite. So I got so sick of the pain. I got so sick of being able to barely walk or barely being able to walk, and I got sick of waking up every day wondering where my next fix was coming from. I got so sick of that life. And I hadn't talked to my foster parents in 2.5 years. And the last time I talked to my ex-wife, I asked her if I can come home. And she said a lot of things had changed. Her mom lived with her best friend lived with her, and she had a foster kid. So I said, okay, I understand. Like, made it sound like it was no big deal, but it crushed me. And we hadn't talked for 2 years. And then, like I said, my foster parents, the ones I mentioned earlier, um, Scott and Rebecca, we didn't talk in 2.5 years. So this
Mm.
was during COVID. I had one more welfare check coming up, or a social assistance check from the government. And do you know what a PIC line is? Like medically? So a
What's that?
PIC line is when they can't find your veins, they go right here.
Ah,
Yeah. And they put
right.
in that tube that goes 5 centimeters above your heart. So all your meds get right to you. So I had one of those in. And before they do your meds, they use a flusher and they flush it out first. Then give you your meds and flush it again. So if you're an addict, all you need to do is get your hands on one of those flushers and you can put drugs in there. And then you get a shot 5 centimeters above your
Ah.
heart. So my plan was with that last government check, I was going to buy fentanyl and spend it all in fentanyl, put the whole thing in the flusher and then say goodbye. Because I was sick of everything. And I'm thinking in my head, my mom killed herself with heroin. Everyone expects me to die the same way. This is what I'm telling myself. And if you're serious about doing it, you're not going to be on social media saying, "Oh, I'm so sad. Feel sorry for me. Somebody reach out." Like if you're going to do it, you're going to do it. You don't say shit to anybody, and that's what was going on. I didn't say nothing on Facebook. I kept up the positive persona I do on Facebook. Um, so because of my legs, and I had no more drugs, I knew if I went to the hospital, they would admit me because of my legs. And then I knew that the addictions team would come see me and give me anti-withdrawal medicine. It would last me until I got that last paycheck and I can kill myself.
Mm.
So because it was COVID, they had free cable, free Wi-Fi, and free telephone. And I had a touchscreen TV that had Facebook on it. So I logged in, and this is 3 days before my plan. So 3 days before my government check. I get a message from my ex-wife, which is my fiance now. And he says, hey, I'm kind of worried about you. I had a bad dream about you last night. If you can get back to me, let me know you're okay. How are your legs doing? Blah, blah, blah. I still love you. So I was like, holy shit. It's crazy. So we talked for a bit. And then, although she lived 15 minutes away from my foster parents, they hadn't spoken. And the next day, I had a message from my former foster dad, Scott, the one that I say I cherish. So he's like, "Hey, kiddo, I haven't talked to you in so long, blah, blah, blah. How you doing? How are the legs holding up? You know, I hope you're good. Let me know. Love you, kiddo." I'm like, holy fuck. So this was the day before my check. So I thought to myself, there's no way this is a coincidence. There's no way these two reached out to me before this day without talking to each other. So I decided to give it one more try. And that's why I'm here.
Here we are.
Yeah, so I quarantined. She told me to come home again. So I quarantined, came home. Like I said, I relapsed three different times since I've been home. And then the third time, she made me promise that I would get help. Sorry. So that's when I got into counseling, and everything's been good. I've been clean ever since. So we're getting married next
I
year.
mean, I'm so
Yeah,
happy for you.
yeah, life's good. Life's good now.
Yeah. And you know, I think that your story is like a true sort of testament of like that human spirit that, you know, there's always going to be someone there that's going to have your back, that's going to, you know, have be there in your corner, in your little corner that will just like, you know, that has love for you and hope for you and faith for you and, you know,
Yeah,
can pick you up in the toughest of times. And I really,
yeah,
really do wish that our listeners that may feel absolutely alone today, that feel isolated, that feel like they have no one, nowhere to go, they can listen to this and sort of know that there is always going to be someone there for them,
yeah.
you know?
That's part of holding on to hope. And that's the thing. I'm so
Yeah.
happy. Like I never burn bridges like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So just to
Yeah,
have,
and I think, you know, like the moment that you started sharing your story on forums on Reddit, that's where I found you, that's where someone else found you. It's like, you know, people are giving you a space to sort of like share your story too, and others are listening to your story. And, you know, in a sense, there's a sense of meaning in that. I can say
yeah,
that for me, you know, being a podcast host, sharing these kind of stories, it gives me such a deep sense of purpose too.
mhm,
Um, so I'll end this with one last question for you. I
okay.
know you have to leave as well, but what do you think our listeners can do to sort of find that hope in them, like for you as well? You're able to say that in hindsight. But what are some things that people can do to sort of like build, rebuild, and find that hope inside within them?
Um, well, first off, you got to decide, how do I word this? There's going to be people out there that say there's addicts listening to this. There's going to be some that are ready to quit, that have been looking for a way to quit, a reason to quit. And there's going to be some that aren't done yet. And that's a harsh reality that a lot of people, you can offer them all the help in the world and they're like, well, I'm not ready to stop yet. Like I want to party still.
Mm-mm.
And then there's some that get sick of it or have seen some things that make them want to quit. So now they're reaching out for help. Now they want help. So
Mm.
my suggestion is if you are done and you know you're done, get something to focus on. Get like a pillar to build around. So find out what you're most passionate about, whether it be family, whether it be, um, I wouldn't say a career because it's hard to have a career if you're an active addict, but
Mm-hmm.
just find a
Yeah.
pillar to build, like every good thing, wrap around that pillar and look at that
Right.
and look at what you built. Whether you have two things on there, whether you have one, you still started. You still have that start. And for people that relapse, I always tell them, you know what? You put the drugs down once. You can do it again. You prove to yourself you could do it.
Mm.
So what I say, maybe even use a totem pole, for example. Build a totem pole, focus on that. Everything you do that's good,
Mm.
stack on there, focus on it. Ask yourself, do I really want to throw this away? I've come this far. Whether you're sober for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, a year, you know, you've come this far. Do you want to
Mm.
throw it away? So, like, I used to hate when people
Yeah.
were like, on social media where they're like, oh, I've been 5 months clean, 6 months clean, and they're all whatever. And then once I got clean, I was like, holy shit, I hit a year. Like, oh my God, it's been a year. And I was so proud. And I felt so bad for feeling shitty about people that are like, oh, like even 5 days clean is amazing. If you're on opiates or if you're on whatever drug, like 5 days is amazing. So for me to sit there and be like, ah, shut up, no one cares. And now that I've been through it, I'm like, wow. So
yeah, I like that. Dale, thank you so much for being on this podcast today and sharing your story with everyone and all our listeners.
Yes, I'm glad we finally got to do this.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Chris Trzynski, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.